Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Daily with Jay and Clay. We're super glad you made it. Have some really important information to share with you so that way you will be prepared as you move through your journey with VA disability compensation and getting those additional benefits that you're looking for. So please stick with us. We got a lot to go over. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. It really does help the channel grow, which is what we're trying to do to get the information out there, right? We're not asking you to sign up for anything. All we're doing is asking you to hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and watch this thing. So with that, Clay, what do you have on the agenda for us today?
The agenda is one topic, but we're really going to break it down. And in my opinion, it's the largest variable when it comes to VA disability, something that we can't control. And it is extremely important. But that topic is C&P exams, or compensation and pension. So as a broad brushstroke, we're going to talk about what are they. We'll talk about what should veterans expect from a C&P exam, and more importantly, how to speak to a C&P examiner. That's extremely critical. And then we'll transition into specific C&P exams for mental health, back conditions, and then the knees. And we'll kind of use those as a template for other C&P exams.
Awesome. That's great. And I'll tell you that C&P exams are probably one of the most feared things in the process.
Yeah.
Especially for a first time, we'll call it filer, a first time for filing a claim with the VA. And even if it's not your first, you still get those butterflies in your stomach. You get stressed out, and the anxiety shoots through the roof for everybody because you just don't know what you don't know. And you're not sure how it's going to go. And you hear all of the horror stories. But I will tell you that the more information that you have about how they work, what they're for, and how you can prep yourself to get the outcome that you deserve, the better you're going to feel about it, and the less that you're going to have that anxiety and stress. Would you agree, Clay?
1,000,000,000%. I like how you framed that, because I said it was the largest variable, but it's a scary appointment, and generally what happens is when a veteran has a C&P exam, the first thing they do is they look at reviews of the examiner. They're always bad, right? The veterans that don't have anything good to say are going to write a review, but the veterans that went through the process extremely smooth aren't going to write a good review. So you're only seeing the loudest voice in the room, so to speak. But getting down to what are C&P exams, it's compensation and pension. So when a veteran submits a claim for mental health, tinnitus, their back, whatever, how the process goes, and this is just an overview, that claim goes to the VA. A rater at the VA looks at the evidence, the relevant evidence, and they say, hey, we need this information. Here are the unknowns. So then they push that to a C&P examiner, and it's generally going to be contracted out. Now, that C&P exam can be at the VA. I've only seen that happen with one veteran. It's regional, okay? So it's more than likely going to be contracted out. And right now, that's VES, QTC, and then LHI. And LHI went through a name crisis. It's also OptumServe, and there's a few other sub-companies within those. But regardless, you submit a claim, it's processed by the VA, and then it's sent to a C&P examiner. And what happens during that time is the VA sends relevant evidence to the examiner. Now, the number one question is, well, is the VA sending all of the relevant evidence? That's the variable, right? So an OIG report from 2022 found that in 68%, I think it was 68, don't quote me on that. It's high though, but 68% of the case studies that they reviewed found that the VA did not follow the proper procedures at sending all of the relevant medical evidence, which obviously leads to the question of, well, how can an examiner give or recommend a positive nexus without having the evidence that they need, right? And so that's why we're covering this topic, to really speak about how to navigate your C&P exam, and it's critical. If you have a bad C&P exam, you will be denied. Go ahead, Jason.
That's right. Absolutely. And before we really jump into it now, if you're still with us, right, hang on, because we are going to dive into it. We just really need to front load this a little bit with the whole idea of what it's for, how it works, the fact that it's not always even the VA who is
Hmm.
producing the CNP exam. And I'll tell you, I'm glad that you've said it 2 or 3 times now, because I will see, and I'm sure you've seen too, we often write down or say what we think we hear. And yes, it is C and P. C and P, not CNP, like an in like November, right? It's C and P. So just for those that have never heard it the correct way. Now, on the VA's website, again, because we're explaining exactly what it is, I'm just going to give you, the viewer here, the VA's kind of view of what it is and what it's for, and then we're going to dive into what the reality looks like. So, VA claim exam, C&P exam, after you file your disability benefits claim, we may ask you to have a claim exam. So they're not even calling it a C&P exam, they're calling it a claim exam, also known as a compensation and pension, or C&P exam. And then it says here that they have a list of questions and why might I need a VA claim exam? So again, I'm just going to read this directly from the VA, so we're hearing it from the horse's mouth, and then we're going to give you our 2 cents on it. This exam will help us, the VA, determine if you have a service-connected disability, which is exactly what you brought up, Clay. And it's hard to do that if you don't have all of the
Yeah.
evidence you need as a claims examiner to be able to say, yes, this is a service-connected disability. So from the VA's mouth, they're saying this exam will help us determine if you have a service-connected disability. It will also help us rate your disability if you have one. So if it is a service-connected disability, there's a second component, and that's the assigning of a rating. Not every condition has just one rating. Most of them have multiple ratings that can be assigned to that specific condition. How did they figure it out? It's in this exam. So the last 2 sentences here: we base your rating on how severe your disability is, and your rating will affect how much disability compensation you receive. Compensation may include things like monthly payments and enrollment in the VA healthcare program, which most people know. But I'm going to throw out there, Clay, that when it comes to, and look, for the viewer, we're going to run off like little side trails as we go
Yeah.
down the main trail. The most common entry into VA healthcare is by way of service connection for disabilities. Okay,
Hmm.
there's whatever it is, 10 different avenues in which you can qualify for VHA, which is the Veterans Health Administration, healthcare through the VA. One of which is means tested, meaning you are below the poverty line, you're not making any money, and so you can come in because you're broke. Okay, don't suggest you go that route. I'd much rather you not. So this is the most popular and most often way that people actually get that care through VHA. So it's really important. Anyway, so that's my little kind of side. Now we'll bring it back in. Back to you, Clay. Where do you want to start diving in on C&P exams?
Yeah, so I think we should start with what veterans should expect and make it as Barney style as possible, right? So you submit that claim, it's processed through the VA. They say, "Hey, here's what we need," and it gets sent to a CNP examiner. That exam company, VES, uh, what VES QTC, excuse me, and
QTC. Yep.
LHI or Optum
Yep.
Serve will reach out to you and schedule that exam. And this one blows my mind here. Just a side note, they schedule the exam with or without you, right? Now they've gotten better over time. So my friend just did a CMP exam, and he told me that they reached out to him for his availability, which I've never heard before. But don't be surprised if it's Friday and you get a thing in the mail that says, "Hey, Monday you have an exam," right? So they will mail you a whole packet. They'll call your phone, leave a voicemail. Take it seriously. This is unless someone died in your family or there's a serious emergency, this becomes your number one priority once you get that appointment. That's my opinion. But that's the process. Now, when a
Yeah,
veteran walks into that exam, sorry, when a veteran
yeah,
walks into that exam, it's absolutely game time. And so, exactly what you said, how they determine if you have the disability and then the severity of the disability, they basically complete what's called a disability benefits questionnaire or a DBQ. And that looks different for every single disability. Go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to double down on your don't miss the appointment piece, right? And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people look, we get it. We're not the only ones pushing out information to you, right? There's other people that have said, don't miss your exam, right? Don't miss your exam. If you do, it has to be something major. And I will tell you that even look, and again, I'm a fan of reading it directly from the horse's mouth, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it says here, missing your exam will delay your claim, obviously. We may also decide your claim based on the existing evidence, which could affect your benefits. So you could get no service connection, or you could get service connected, but at a 0%, right? Which maybe you shouldn't be a 0. Maybe you should be a 60, right? But they couldn't figure it out because you missed your exam. If you missed your exam, what we, the VA, consider a good reason, called good cause, is they will schedule you a new appointment. But look, here's the examples of good cause. Someone in your immediate family dies. You're homeless. You're hospitalized. You have a terminal illness that caused you to miss the appointment. So it has to be major, right?
Yeah.
You need to, make arrangements with your work. You need to make arrangements for your child. Take your child with you if you don't even have another option, right? Do not miss this, because this is life-changing, life-altering benefits that right now you're on that razor's edge when it comes to that CMP exam, and going and not going could be catastrophic. Back to
Yeah.
you, Clay.
Yeah, it's funny you said bring your child because I actually brought my now 6-year-old daughter to one of my CMP exams, and she had her iPad, so she was fine. But yeah, so once you walk into that examiner's office, it is kind of weird. And the reason I said CMP exams are the largest variable is because there's so much personality based on the examiner. And I don't want to bash CMP examiners. It's going to seem like I am, okay? But is there a chance where you could have a confrontational CMP examiner? Absolutely. Is there a chance where that examiner could have a preconceived notion of your case already? Absolutely. Okay. Especially if the VA didn't send them all the evidence, which is far too often the case, right? And so it is critical to not only understand what happens during the CMP exam, but understand your evidence so that way you can communicate to that examiner. But basically, you walk in the office and it's just like a regular doctor's office, right? There'll be a receptionist desk. You sign in, put what time you're down there, then you kind of just wait. And then you'll be called into that examiner's office, which is either a physician, a nurse practitioner, right? A PA, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, various specialties. And they will just be upfront with you. And the first question will probably be, if you're claiming migraines, it'll probably be, hey, talk to me about migraines. And so my advice to veterans is just to answer the questions in full and understand your evidence. But that's the process of a CMP examiner. There are tons of variables out there, and there's an opposite side of that too, because I did mention it could be confrontational, right? I just have to mention that. But the majority of CMP examiners that I've seen and my friends seen, the opposite's also true, right? Where it's not confrontational, they have a great personality, but it's just something to be aware of. And I would caution veterans from being confrontational, right? The same thing applies if the veteran has a preconceived notion, this examiner's this and this examiner's that because YouTube told me and YouTube told me they're watching my every move.
Right.
Relax, breathe. That preconceived notion, okay, will absolutely mess with your CMP exam. They are a person. Speak to
Yep.
them like a person. If you come in there hostile, you know, they're a person would be hostile back. So just that would be my advice. Just be aware of that. I know YouTubers, you know, say fear C&P examiners. They're not your friend, which is true, right? They're not your friend at all. And it's not a healthcare appointment. It's a legal proceeding. It's a legal exam. So that's really my advice on what veterans should expect during a C&P exam. Jason, what is your 2 cents on what a veteran should expect when it comes to just the C&P exam in general?
In general. So I guess the first thing that you should expect is anything can change. You don't know exactly what's going to, like when your buddy could have filed a claim the same time you did for the same thing, and they got their C&P exam in 2 months, right? And you're still waiting. So there is no rhyme or reason. Things get shifted all over, and you guys could live in the same town, have the same VA right there. But guess what? Sometimes, depending on workload, the VA will transfer files to some other VA that's less busy, and yours could have got transferred somewhere else, but then whatever, right? So life happens. So don't compare, first of all. So expect the unexpected. Be prepared. And then what's happened to me personally, I've had 2 C&P exams scheduled, one with an outside contractor and one with the VA. Then I got a cancellation when I went there. I showed up to the contractor one because I wasn't going to miss it. They're like, oh, we don't have an appointment for you. Oh, okay. So I left, right? Because the VA double scheduled me, and then they canceled one, but they never told me that it was canceled. So expect the unexpected. The other thing is when you receive the information, I've only noticed this with contractors. I haven't really noticed it with the VA. If your C&P exam is with a contractor, and I'm going to throw out this caveat, it may or may not happen. Don't know, right? It's at least likely as not that this could happen, right? What I've seen is you'll get a packet in the mail that says that your C&P exam is on whatever date and time and location and all that stuff. And oh, by the way, fill out this information.
Yeah.
Right? And it actually asks you questions about your condition. Don't half do that. Don't half do that. Take your time and really complete that, because guess what? That's what you're going to leave them. That information with the information that you put on there. So even when you stumble a little bit, which hopefully you won't, and we're going to give you some tips on how to not stumble when you're there, but being prepared in that way will help you out so much. So take the time to fill that out. Expect something like that to complete. And I would say that's the only real thing that I could add as far as what to expect with a C&P exam, other than the things that you've already touched on. The only other thing is that usually the C&P is kind of like that last hurdle for you.
Yeah.
Now everything's done, and now you're just waiting for a decision, which is usually the longest time period of your life. It takes, every day feels like a month. You're constantly checking in. But hopefully through this video, we're going to give you, some information on how you can make that process go the way that you want it to go, the best that you can, so it can alleviate, again, some of that stress and get you to where you want to be. So where do you want to go now, Clay?
Yeah, you actually said something that put something in my mind, and I definitely want to address it. That I've also had the same experience from VES specifically. I haven't seen any other of the other companies do this. Side note, you're the second person I know that had a C&P exam at a VA facility. So congrats. But when VES sent me a packet, it was for my knee specifically, and they asked me to upload evidence, or is there anything that they want them to review from me? And I think that is perfect, okay? Because if the VA did not send them whatever, now I have the opportunity to send them. And the reason why I wanted to double tap that is because I've heard that multiple veterans tell me specifically that, hey, the VA already has this, I'm not sending it. I'm telling you right now, that is not the move to do. That contracting company is basically holding their hand out and saying, hey, brother,
Yep.
I
Let
got
me
you.
help you.
I got you.
Yep.
I got you. Okay. I got you. Here's your second chance. Is there anything you want me to review? And whatever heartache or headache or time you put towards that, I promise you it is much better than being denied, complaining, and then going through the appeal process. I promise you every time of every day of the week, that's the case. And so, and then that also led me to another thought before we move on. And someone always asks this question of, can I bring an evidence or can I bring a statement to my CMP exam? And you're going to get different answers on this. Okay. And I'll give you the technical answer and then I'll give you like the real life answer. So technically speaking, if that examiner wanted to, they are only required to review the evidence the VA sent them, point blank. Okay. On my channel, I had an interview with a QTC CMP examiner who decided to remain anonymous, and the information he gave was beautiful. But a day after we had went live, he said way too much and gave way too much information. And I even told him, hey, man, I think you're saying too much. And so we deleted the live, out of respect for him. But what he said is they are obligated to only use the evidence the VA sends them. And if the veteran has evidence, it is personality based. And that QTC examiner says some of his coworkers are hardcore, I'm not reviewing any evidence the veteran gives me. And that is within the confines of the contract they have with the VA. That's the right thing to do in their eyes. So I say all of that to say this. If you bring evidence with you, which I personally would recommend, okay? If you bring evidence with you, first, let's say, VES contacts you before your exam. Don't walk in there with evidence for the first time. Call VES. You can call them and say, hey, I have this evidence. Is there any way I can upload it? And I'm telling you, every company has an avenue to upload that evidence. That is much better than just showing up on the spot. Because that personality game, and I'm not saying it's right. This is just a reality. The personality game can really take that CMP exam downhill, and it will be a bad experience. And all of a sudden, you're denied. And is it right? Probably not. That's all. That's my rant on that, Jason. But you did bring up a really, really, really good point. Go ahead.
I'm glad that you did, because the bottom line is that you can remove some of the personality by making that phone call up front.
Mm-hmm.
And for vets that are watching this, look, the answer is always no if you don't ask, right? Don't be afraid of the flagpole, right? We've grown up with this military behavior of, okay, look, I kind of want to stay away from that area. The less amount of time I can spend there, probably the better. Wrong answer. Make the phone call and drive the actions that you want, right? We all have that in us, right? We're a special breed of people, I like to believe. And you make that phone call, you have that conversation with the front staff person. It's low threat. You could be, nice and, talking a higher pitch if you want, all that good stuff. And then you can actually, maybe get that stuff uploaded. So then the examiner gets it, and now they're reviewing it without you there doing anything. Mm-hmm. So before we start jumping into how you prepare or whatever for your CMP exam, because we're kind of talking about the overarching what to expect. So I feel like we're pretty good with the what to expect piece. I'm glad that you double tapped on that. My company was QTC that I had that sent me the information to write down and bring with me or whatever. So again, that's kind of the how to prepare, I guess. And I'm not sure if that's the next stage that we want to move into in this, but it seems like a natural progression.
Yeah, let's transition to how to speak to a CMP examiner, because this is critical, right? So you understand
probably
the foundation.
In Latin.
Yeah, sign language, right?
No,
So this is my personal advice. This is not doctrine at all. I like to approach a CMP examiner kind of mathematically, and to understand the formula, and I'll give it to you here in a second. but you have to understand what the VA needs for service connection. It's not what they want, it's what they need. They need it. And if you don't have it, you will be denied. And it goes down to it's what's known as the big three. It's in 38 CFR. In any decision letter you ever have, you can look at the reference codes for these three. Number one is the in-service event, okay? Meaning something in the military happened or the condition manifested itself in service. Sometimes people call this time in service. It's the same thing. Two is a current diagnosis. That condition must be chronic. A very, very common example of a denial for current diagnosis is, people will join the military with flat feet. It's extremely common. And then they go through 10 years of military service. There's no evidence of foot pain. It's labeled as acute, meaning that condition is not chronic. And so they have a C&P exam, and then they are diagnosed with acute flat feet. The condition must be chronic. Okay, it has to be a disability. That's where we get the name of VA disability. Although I firmly disagree with that, and I would just say VA compensation. That's the second note. And then the third thing, which is most important, that will be provided by the C&P examiner. Okay, your examiner is required by contract to give the nexus. The nexus is just linking one thing to another. In this case, it would be the current diagnosis and your in-service events to your military service. And there's some jargon on that. That was a solid pun saying at least as likely. There's 5 nexus statements the VA will use. 3 of them you'll see. It's less likely as not, which means no. It's at least as likely, which means probably, right? But in VA terms, it's a yes. And then there's more than likely, which is like a super yes. The other 2 are due to, which is 100%, or not due to, but you will rarely see those. And so how to speak to a C&P examiner. Now that we understand the foundation of the big 3, the formula goes, the C&P examiner says, hey, talk to me about migraines. I'm going to tell you what you don't say. Oh, I get migraines, 2 or 3 times per month. That's about it. You don't say that, okay? Here's how I would answer that question. Hey, talk to me about your migraines. Oh, in 2013, because I know my evidence, because we are informed and educated, in 2013 in the Marine Corps on my health assessment, I complained about migraines XYZ. From then, I was told to suck it up, so I was doing over-the-counter medication. When I left the Marine Corps, I had migraines the entire time. Then I went to VA healthcare. Okay, I went to my primary care team. I talked to my physician about migraines. I was given medication, injections, whatever that looks like for you. Okay, and I still have migraines ever since. Now, the formula for that, if you were to dissect that, is you were literally giving the examiner the in-service event, the current diagnosis, and continuity, right? So if you take the in-service event, you add the current diagnosis, and then you add the continuity, that equals service connection. And you're basically doing the C&P examiner's job verbally. And that response of referencing those 3 is a lot better than saying, I get migraines 2 or 3 times per month, right? I read 38 CFR. Oh yeah, they're prostrating. I'm sensitive to light. Which is good that you did do that, but you're missing how to actually articulate what the heck is happening to you in a way that the VA needs for service connection. That was a huge, long rant. I'm very passionate about this topic on speaking with the C&P examiner because it is a large variable. Jason, I would like to hear your 2 cents on, if you were to give a veteran advice on speaking with the C&P examiner, because this is make or break. This is make or break right here.
Good point. It is make or break. And I am in the camp of there's 2 things that you need to accomplish. Service connection, yes, all day long. But the thing that is missed so often is this is your opportunity to address what your rating should be. You are the patient, and you should know you better than any doctor. And if you read, as Clay said, the schedule of ratings for your condition, and you can read it. Now, granted, some of the words are super medical terms, and they use weird words, right? If you don't know what it means, Google search it, translate it, and you'll go, oh, that means difficulty swallowing, right? So let's talk about GERD for a second with the C&P exam. So I love that you used migraines. That's one of my favorite ones to use. And now I think that with these two examples, migraines and GERD, this shows you how important your words are. Okay.
Yeah.
It's different than a back condition or something like that, or high blood pressure, because they'll just measure your blood pressure and it is what it is, and you're on whatever medication you're on, or you can bend this far before there's pain. Now, granted, your words matter there, but there is the reality of this is how far I can bend. So you can really screw up your results by not being prepared. Now, being prepared, and I like your algorithm for creating your formula, right? Your algebra to figure out how to do that. And that's really important, because what Clay is talking about here is, imagine if, and we alluded to this at the beginning, if the VA didn't really send all of the relevant information to the C&P examiner. Now you need to bridge those gaps. Like Clay said, you need to have that nexus. The nexus is the link between your diagnosed condition and your time in service, either manifesting during your time in service or as a result of your time in service, is kind of the way I look at it. Now, with GERD, let's say the same example, right? You went through and you have nothing in your military records regarding GERD. So you're trying to, I call it manufacture evidence. Okay, so you've done that to get your claim going. So now you're at the C&P exam. You've gotten your buddy statements. You've gotten, your nexus letter from your doctor, and you've done all your homework. Now you're at the C&P exam, and I've seen this happen, and it's very sad to run into situations after the fact, because it's always the same thing. I wish I would have known, right? So that's the whole point of this, is to eliminate the I wish I would have known. So what would I tell somebody who's going in? Well, what I would tell them is review that schedule of ratings for GERD. Make sure that you understand where you are in that schedule of ratings, right? You're the patient. You know how bad it is, right? If you rate a 60% rating in your mind because you're reading it and you should rate that, then you should. If it's a 30, then be honest with yourself, right, as you're doing this. And then you need to be able to regurgitate that information at the C&P exam. So you can either write it down, right? Now, if it's a QTC or the other one where they're asking you for that information, this is where you want to take that information and put it in that form that you're going to give back to that C&P examiner. Or you're going to call in and say, hey, I have some additional, additional evidence or statement or whatever that I want to add into the file, right? I'm the patient. You're going to be asking me questions anyway. So if you're able to, great. You're taking that information from that C&P or from that schedule of ratings, taking that information, printing it out, writing it down, whatever, showing up to your C&P exam. Now you're there. Now you're going to incorporate what Clay said, which is you're painting the picture of, in whatever year, in the middle of my time in service, I started experiencing this. It was frowned upon. It's no surprise to the VA or the C&P examiners that going to medical for anything was frowned upon. They hear it 1,000 times a day. So it's not like it's, what? I can't believe you didn't go. Turned a little blue there. I get a little, sad about it. So here you are saying that you have not went to medical or saw a corpsman, saw a medic, went to the battalion aid station or anything like that. You self-medicated, like Clay said. And so now you've done that until you got out. And then 5 years later, after you got out, you saw a commercial with Larry the Cable Guy about Prilosec. And so now you're like, hey, whoa, well, maybe that one might help me and I don't need to eat a bottle of Tums. So you go to the doctor and finally you get diagnosed and you get the Prilosec, and all of a sudden it's, not as bad. You can actually maybe sleep most of the way through the night instead of choking on hot lava. And so now life's a little bit better, but now you have your diagnosis and you have your prescription and you have all that information that you could take in. So you're explaining that it happened during the time of service. I like to say you're kind of explaining why you didn't have it documented while you were in service. You need to explain why, and it needs to make sense. And does the VA get it right, even if the C&P examiner says, at least likely is not? Sometimes the VA still screws it up and goes, well, you know, I see this other thing, and there's nothing really in service, and we'll deny it. And we collectively have probably seen thousands of denials turn into ratings, right? Yeah. And so this happens, and so you need to be able to stand firmly, knowing what you should be awarded. I feel like I'm going on and on here. I'm going to wrap it up real quick. So the big thing is that knowing the schedule of ratings is important, and being able to tie it back to your time in service in your conversation. Okay, I'm going to give a quick example after I pass it back to you, Clay. But I do have an example of like a veteran A, veteran B piece who's speaking to the VA. But I want to kick it back to you for anything that might have popped in your head on my rant. I'm trying to joust you now with rants. I'm going to work on shortening mine up a little bit.
So there is, and this is actually, you know, this is we'll call it a VA secret. It actually is a VA secret because it's not, they don't publicize this. But what raters see on their computer whenever they are deciding a claim, and I know this because I have tons of friends, not tons, I have a few friends that are raters right now, and I speak with them. We're all government employees, it's fine. And so how that process looks, because you mentioned 38 CFR, which is critical, okay? And those symptoms in 38 CFR, so for instance, GERD, if you Google GERD 38 CFR, you're going to find a link that says eCFR, which is electronic, you know, CFR. And then you hit that button, you would word search GERD, not GERD, it would be the gastro reflux disease, whatever the word is. But yeah, there you go. He's got my guy.
Yeah, you don't want to read these. They're a very dry read.
Control F goes a very long way on the internet, but that's how you figure out your symptoms. Those symptoms are on the DBQ, and this is really getting at the VA secret, okay, that raters have. Depending on how that DBQ is completed, right? So if you say I have migraines 3-4 times a month, I think is the criteria for 50%. It might be 4 and 5, whatever number it is. If that's what you say, and more importantly, because we are informed and educated, we told our primary healthcare team that. So now our testimony is supporting our evidence, okay? And not, you know, if you give a testimony in lieu of evidence, you know, the weight of that self-report is not saying it's not important. It's there. It's just not as good as supported by medical evidence, right? So I tell my primary healthcare team I get 4 to 5 migraines per month. Boom, in my VA health records. I go to my C&P exam. I tell them I get 4 or 5 migraines per month. How that translates when that DBQ from the exam company is sent to the VA, it's not AI or machine learning, but it's a automatic software that pops up on your claim that says, hey, at least as likely as not. The system, so the rater doesn't recommend anything. They do, but I'll get to that in a second. The system recommends what it should be, right? So the system will say, hey, this was at least as likely as not service connected. I, meaning the software, is recommending 50%. And so what the rater does, they have 3 options. One, and let's just say migraines at 30% for what I'm about to say next. So let's say the system recommended migraine service connected at 30%. The rater, right, the VSR, now has 3 options to make. One, accept, based on the evidence, accept the recommendation from the system. Boom, service connected migraines 30%. Easy peasy, you know, they meet their time quota, claim's done. The second option is to reduce it. So, hey, I know the system recommended 30%, but I'm gonna reduce it, and they have that power. But if they reduce it, they have to justify why, and it goes back to what? Medical freaking evidence. That's why it is critical to have evidence for that claim. And even if they, give you a 10% for migraines or 0%, now you have the higher level review, which to be real does suck. Okay, it happens. The VA is not perfect, but medical evidence is what saves it. It's what saves your claim, right? The third option they have, so they can approve the recommendation, they can lower the recommendation, or they can raise the recommendation. And again, if they raise it, it has to be justified through evidence. So just knowing that VA secret, okay, I think it adds more weight to what you said, Jason, about understanding the symptoms that the VA is looking for, right? It's not that the VA wants, they are looking for that. I think GERD is a fantastic example, and I know you're going to go into that. But if I know the symptoms for GERD, by God, I'm going to have evidence that states I have these symptoms, and then I'm going to give my testimony. So as a C&P examiner is marking that DBQ, all of a sudden it goes back to the VA, and then the prompt says, hey, GERD 30%, right? GERD 60%. That is much, much easier. And it makes not only the C&P examiner's job easier, it makes the rater's job easier. The raters are bound by time quotas. Whether you agree with it or not, that is, that's neither here or there, but they have time quotas. They have to punch out claims like that. And with especially now, today, with PACT Act, what seems like 2 years ago, which is insane to say, well, I guess a year and a half, there is technically still a backlog, but it's not as much as they thought it was going to be, which is a good sign. There's still like 900,000 or something claims, right? So imagine you're being a rater. You got 30 claims to get through today. Answer this question yourself. Are you going to agree with the prompt and go fast? Or are you going to be like, you know what? I'm going to control F this veteran's, VA medical records, and then make a recommendation to increase or lower that? No. The likely scenario, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying the likely scenario is the rater is going to agree with the prompt because they don't have to justify it. It's easy. And it gets back to the 38 CFR. Now that was a rant, Jason. I feel like I ranted, so I'm jousting back to you.
Right.
Let's go with veteran A and veteran B example. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to what you're about to say.
Awesome. So number one, I want to add one thing to what you said, and it's short, don't worry, is we tend to think we know what the VA wants to hear because we heard somebody say something somewhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't always apply, right? It might have been a situational thing for a specific situation. The VA doesn't care really on how much your migraines are affecting your daily life, and and you this and you that. I can't ride a motorcycle and I can't play with my kids. There's nowhere in the schedule of ratings that assigns the 50, 30, or 10 does it say can't play with kids or your life sucks now. Solid. Those are not the words that it's looking for. Now, yes, it can affect those things, so don't get me wrong, but you need to have the right words to be able to add in there, which then, of course, makes the VA's job easier, right? So we want to make it as easy as possible. So I'm going to give you the quick A and B, right? So we'll use GERD, and both veterans, A and B, both have GERD, both have it documented enough for service connection, so that part's fine, okay? Because remember, C&P is for two things: getting service connected and getting the appropriate rating, okay? There's too many times where you're like, why'd they rate me so low? Well, it's probably because you missed saying something. Now, ideally, like Clay had mentioned, you have already front-loaded all of this information with your primary care provider. Okay. All this stuff is in there. Maybe you even went and got a DBQ completed by your primary care provider. And this is stuff we talked about in the past, both I think on this channel and our own personal channels, which is very important. I mean, you want to swim upstream with this stuff. You can still correct it at the C&P exam if you didn't do it up front, but it's way better if you're just doubling down on the information just over and over again, saying the same stuff. So now you're at the C&P exam. You're already primed for service connection. That's not an issue. Veteran A is just going with the flow. Maybe he heard some things somewhere and he thinks he's prepared enough because he has a buddy that got service connected for a bad knee, right? Now he's going in for his GERD, and the C&P examiner is having some conversations with him, and it's just kind of conversational based. It's not like they're testing you with anything. You're just sitting across the desk having a couple questions, and they're answering, they're filling in the blanks, right? So they're just answering. You're answering the questions. They're asking you questions based on whatever they have on their computer. And basically the questions are, tell me about your GERD, right? Tell me about, besides the fact of making it service connected, what kind of signs or symptoms do you have? Loosely is what they're asking, right? Tell me how it's affecting you. They're not asking, well, I can't play with my kids, right? They're asking you legitimate signs and symptoms that the VA is going to be looking for, but they're not going to tell you the words that they're looking for. So you need to be able to say that. But veteran A didn't prepare. So veteran A says, it's bad heartburn. Okay, great. Is there anything else going on? Well, it's really bad heartburn. Is there anything else? Well, it's really super, super bad. Horrible, horrible, horrible. Keep you up at night. Horrible heartburn. Okay, well, all you've said is heartburn so far. And then maybe they push a little bit more, and then you throw out something like, well, it really affects my quality of life. Like that's really going to matter. They don't, that's not even a thing on GERD, right? So, okay, the C&P examiner is now like, okay, look, I've asked you 17 different times on how this is affecting you. You've given me heartburn and it affects your life. Okay, cool. Thanks. Have a great one. Off you go. Now, veteran B comes in, same situation, but this veteran actually read the schedule of ratings and is able to regurgitate the information. So now they're sitting in there and they're asking them, so the same questions, and the answers are a little more than heartburn. They're saying, well, I have heartburn, I have regurgitation, sometimes I vomit, sometimes there's some blood in my vomit, I've lost weight over the last couple of years, I have pain in my sternum, I have pain that kind of shoots out, I feel like I'm having a heart attack, the pain in my chest kind of shoots down my arm. It's been really horrible. I really feel like there is just a considerable impairment to my health because I understand that it's eroding my esophagus and, it can result in cancer, right? So now you've named off like 5 or 6 different symptoms of GERD that are actually listed in the schedule of ratings for GERD. And that's going to align more with a 60% rating, for sure a 30, but probably a 60% rating, where veteran A is going to get maybe a 10%, So the difference, even if you're exhibiting the same things, it's what you're saying that matters. And they're looking for specific words. I'm a big fan of, look, this is not some sort of closed book test, right? It says exam. And so we all freak out and go, okay, let me write the, answers on my wrist or something, No. Write it down, take it in. Everybody thinks that we all have TBI, so who cares, right? Show up and be like, look, I this is really important to me. I wrote down a few notes so I don't forget, because believe me, I forget where I put things all the time. How am I going to remember everything I need to say at a C&P exam when I'm already stressed out? It's not going to happen. Write it down, take the pressure off, show up prepared, and just answer the questions with the relevant information needed to get you not just service connected, but the correct rating. All right, there's my joust back, buddy.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely solid. I'm a huge fan of yes, understanding 38 CFR, obviously, but more specifically, understanding you in relation to that schedule of ratings. That is critical. And it's really a good transition for what we're about to talk about, which is mental health, back, and knees. The 2024 report, which reviews 2023, Came out like a few days ago, and mental health, back condition, and knees were up there in like the top 4 claimed disabilities. Tinnitus and hearing loss were up there too. But a very, very popular, and I don't know if that's the right word because it's it's sad, but a lot of veterans are claiming mental health. And so I think we should speak about specifically a CMP exam for mental health. And mental health is a different beast. Okay. It's very unique. Whereas like a joint condition, like your wrists, your knees, your elbow, they're all generally the same. Okay. And we will cover back and knees and what that looks like. But mental health is a different beast. This exam can last anywhere from, I don't know, I would probably say 30 minutes to 2 hours. I'll tell you personally, I don't want to give too much information, but my mental health exam lasted a little bit over 2 hours, and it was rough, man. Like and I was not. This was new veteran me in 2019. I was not prepared. I had no idea what 38 CFR was. I had no idea what evidence was. I didn't know how to speak to the examiner. Now, luckily by the grace of God, I had a solid examiner. He was awesome, really understanding, and he asked me directed questions. You may not have that. You may not get an examiner. That's a rock star, so to speak. So a mental health CMP exam, it's a different beast. And it's really broken down into 3 different sections. And this isn't doctrine. This is just how I would explain it to like my mom. Okay. So the first section is pre-service. What happened to you? How was your mental state prior to the military? Right. And, I'll jokingly / not jokingly throw out some things here. Right. Did your dad beat you when you were a child? Right. Did he leave for cigarettes and never come back? Are your parents divorced? These are questions, mainly are your parents divorced? What was your childhood like? The CMP examiner is going to ask you those questions, right? Were you abused as a child? What did that look like? How was your childhood? And I'm not saying lie, because we are truthful, but we're also informed and educated. I will say this though, and I think it's a disservice to veterans if we don't, is if you spend an hour talking about how your dad beat you or how your childhood was this and childhood was that, you are giving the VA a reason to deny your claim, right? So with that said, be mindful. Now, if you have zero evidence, and I mean zero evidence, because like who, especially, when I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I'm also 31, so that might be different decades for whoever, but whose parents brought them to therapy when they were a child, right? Mine didn't. I say that because there's no evidence of anything of at least my mental health, and I would assume that's very common within the veteran community. So if there's no evidence of that, I'm not saying don't bring it up because we don't lie, but at the same time, I'm not gonna give the VA a reason to say, hey, your PTSD is actually from the stressor that happened when you were 6 versus the military. And there's an aggravation claim, and that's a whole other topic, but let's just not give the VA that option. That's pre-service, okay? During service is the absolute cream of the crop, and this is when, and I'm going to try to explain this fast, Jason, and not go on a rant, but this should be the bulk of the appointment, okay? And I'm saying that from a not doctrine standpoint. Meaning, if I'm making a claim that my military service caused my PTSD or my depression or my anxiety, insomnia, whatever, I need to tell the examiner why. Hey, in 2012, I had this deployment, this happened, whatever. In 2015, I was in a training accident. I have reoccurring thoughts. This happened. Whatever that is for you, this is your moment to be vulnerable. That's extremely difficult. Excuse me, very difficult to be vulnerable. But this is the one moment that you have to take your shield off. You have to lower your walls and talk to the examiner. Now, the examiners are really good at what they do. Okay, There are techniques that they have to kind of navigate the boundaries that we put up. But my advice to any veteran is to be vulnerable, especially if this applies to you. You have to be vulnerable. That's during service. Post service sounds exactly what it is, right? Hey, how have these symptoms affected your life? So, like GERD in 38 CFR, you're not going to see quality of life in that rating schedule. For mental health, it's the complete opposite. It is all about the quality of life. In fact, it's so much so that it's about the quality of life of the people in your life, right? So for 70% mental health, and this is as of right now, February of 24, it talks about, I'll paraphrase it, the inability to maintain effective relationships, right? So for instance, if you have children, you might be emotionally disconnected with your kids or emotionally disconnected with your spouse or with your parents, whatever that looks like. This is the time to say, hey, this event happened in 2015. Now I'm married and I have a son. It's really difficult for me to sympathize or empathize. I am quick to anger. So whenever my son makes a mistake, I'm afraid that I'm going to hit him. I'm going to lash out. I'm not saying that is you, but if it is, that is your moment to talk about that. And how do you know to say that? Because we read 38 CFR. So Jason, that's kind of the quick overview of mental health C&P exams. I want to hear your take on it, or if you have anything to add or tips for a veteran going through mental health, and then we'll transition into back.
Yeah, Clay, thanks for sharing your, snippet of your own personal experience. I'm going to throw out there that I think that it's very important to understand exactly what you said, how it does have that pre, during, and post aspect, because you can get hung up in that pre section.
Yeah.
And ideally, you're already in a situation where you have been diagnosed with PTSD from a service-connected event, right? So, it's important for you to know, look, you are diagnosed for PTSD. Don't get confused, right? Things get blurry, and you can start to project certain thoughts and behaviors on prior situations. And knowing that could be a possibility, know that you could talk about things, whatever, but you need to move on and not linger there. And here's the thing. Most people did not have a great childhood.
Yeah.
Things happen, man. My mom was married like 5 or 6 times. I moved all the time. I lived all over the place. I changed high schools 5 times. I changed grade schools 7, right? So look, everybody has their own situation prior. Most people are fine moving on in life.
Yeah.
It's that event in the military that you need to focus on, that you're diagnosed for. So I just want to bring that mindful point up of projecting things onto previous situations potentially. I also want to throw out survivor's guilt is real. Okay. And that can also, back to Clay's point of being disconnected to your loved ones. Okay. You could find yourself becoming more and more kind of removed because you don't want to get too close, because if something ever did happen, it's like, I don't want to feel that again, because my buddy who is no longer with us, I was tight and I don't want to be that close anymore, kind of like to anybody. So those are real things. And I will tell you that what I tell folks that are going in for their C&P exam on mental health for specifically PTSD or MST, right? The two big ones, is this will probably, because this is usually the very beginning stages of you talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? Is when you finally decided to actually push through and get a claim and all that stuff. And you're talking about it to somebody new now. You may have had a few conversations with a psychologist, or maybe you were in some sort of a group therapy thing, kind of a lower thresholds, right? But now the rubber's meeting the road and you're having this real heart to heart, right? And It will
Totally agree.
be the hardest thing you ever did. But when you come out on the other side, you'll actually feel, in a weird way, a little bit like a door has opened, and maybe now I can actually get some real therapy to help me just manage my life a little bit better. And I would just say be prepared for that, because you're going to want to grab the tissue. I don't care how strong you are, the tears will come, and you just need to be prepared for that. And like Clay said, they can last a while, so
Hmm.
block off some time. And I would say one of my suggestions that I've always told folks is make a date with a buddy, and whatever you want to call it. Make it a coffee appointment, a date. Set a time with somebody that you can relate to, confide in, a coffee, whatever, right after that C&P exam. Because sometimes you just need somebody that you trust, somebody that you could talk to, right? Somebody that maybe chewed some of the same dirt or whatever, because it's gonna rile you up a little bit, and it's going to make you feel all kinds of different ways. And sometimes it's just good to be around somebody. So that's really it for me, Clay, that I'd like to throw out there. So
Yeah,
back
no,
to you.
that's solid. We are. I find myself, especially with our channels, so focused on disability that sometimes we completely just kind of forget about healthcare, which is extremely important, right? The older you get, the worse it gets. Um, that's the reality. And I'm 31, and I'm saying that. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
let's moving on to back, and then we'll do a quick one for knees because joints are basically all the same. A C&P exam for back, which is one of the most commonly claimed disabilities that is service connected. And when I say back, I mean neck, middle, and lower, or cervical, thoracolumbar, and then lumbar. That's all the
You
same
with
stuff.
your fancy words.
So there's 3 rating schedules, and this is a different beast as well. Mental health has a general rating schedule for mental health, right? GERD has a rating schedule for GERD. Um, elbows has one for elbows. Back has 3 different schedules. Okay, the most common one, and I'm not saying this from data, but the most common one, probably like 95% of the time, is going to be range of motion. And so, what does that mean? How far can you bend forward? I can't bend forward right now, but bend backward, right? Side to side, and then rotation. And if you look at 38 CFR for back, if you Google back 38 CFR, you'll find a chart that shows the different measurements for range of motion. That's how back is probably going to be rated at, right? And it goes up to like 0, 10, 20, 40, and then there's a 50 plus up to 100 rating schedule. I can't remember off the top of my head. That's for range of motion. That's one way it's rated. The second way it's rated is off of incapacitating episodes, which is its own rating schedule for back. So what is an incapacitating episode? Hey, I'm on bed rest. I can't do anything. I am incapacitated. That, the VA is very good at using ambiguous language because incapacitating means different things depending on what we're talking about. But for the back, generally speaking, if you have IVDS, which is like invertebrate, whatever DS stands for, right? Disease, um, that might put you on bed rest. And there are episodes, so 4 to 5, incapacitating episodes per month, 50%, whatever that looks like. Spine frozen in an unfavorable position, 50%, whatever it is that looks like. So there's range of motion schedule, there's incapacitating episode schedule, then there's one at the bottom, which is its own beast, and we won't cover it right now, but it's arthritis. So you can have arthritis in your back. Now, why do you need to understand the 3 rating schedules? Okay, there's 2 answers. One, you don't really need to. You need to understand your evidence. At least I would make that argument, because the VA is going to rate all 3, They are going to look at range of motion. They are going to ask you about incapacitating episodes, especially if you have evidence for bed rest. But let's say you're rated 40% for range of motion and 20% for incapacitating episodes. The VA is by default going to take the 40% for range of motion. They take the highest of the rating. So you don't really have to understand it. You have to understand your evidence. The second reason you need to understand is because for the back, if you are rated under incapacitating episodes, you are not able to claim secondary sciatic nerve damage, which is huge, right? And I don't think that's talked about that often. Everyone talks about, ooh, radiculopathy, you can claim sciatic nerve damage to your lower spine, right? Same thing up in your arms from your neck, which is true, except if you're rated under incapacitating episodes. Now that leads to the question, how do I know which one I'm rated at? Because the VA is just going to say 40%, right? That could be range of motion. It could be incapacitating episodes. No one knows. If that's you and you have your legs tingle, there's 1,000 needles, and you don't know what you are rated for, and you have symptoms of bed rest. If you don't have bed rest, you're obviously rated on range of motion, okay? But if you do, what I would recommend is request your rating code sheet. That's another topic for another video on how to do that, but you just go to your regional office, request that. It's a relatively easy and fast process versus like your entire C file. If you just request your rating code sheet, pretty easy. Or you're smart.
Accredited rep can get it too.
If you're smart, you use the VSO because that's what we recommend, right? They also have that option. But that's how the back is rated. And the same thing for general C&P exam exists, right? You still need the in-service event and the current diagnosis. But for back, unlike mental health, the back can be seen, right? Via X-ray, MRI, whatever. So you don't have to tell the C&P examiner, ooh, I have a dislocated L4 or L5, which I know nothing about back diagnosis. I can tell you there's 100 of them. They're all the same. For VA rating purposes, they're all the same. You don't have to say that. You really need to say, or you need to demonstrate what that range of motion looks like. So for you, Jason, can you speak about range of motion? I definitely have my 2 cents, but I want to hear what you have to say about range of motion, not just range of motion in general, but specifically when you're at a C&P exam going through the range of motion portion of the DBQ. And what are some things you would tell veterans?
Right. Don't take pain pills before you show up. Yeah. Right. I mean, so one of the things that they'll say is, tell me when you feel pain, right? Tell me when and I'll tell you that if you're going in for back, one, it's important to understand what Clay was saying about the rating schedules, right? That's great information. Thanks for sharing that, Clay. And I agree with you that I think that the primary is the range of motion rating, right? And what's interesting is that because there's also a rating schedule for arthritis, you could have a back condition on this one, and then you can have an arthritis one over here, which is also important. So anyway, when it comes to your back, and you're going into these exams, they're going to ask you often if you feel any pain, or tell them when you feel the pain, and they'll do the flexation, exactly what you said, the lean forward, lean back, side to side, all that stuff. And we're so used to pushing through things. It's like, it's so ingrained into us. Even going into the exam, you're telling yourself, okay, I'm going to show them exactly. I'm just going to go like this because that's where it hurts. And then you get there and you're trying to touch your toes and you're grunting, trying to get through it to show them that you can do it for some weird reason you think you're supposed to. Really kind of be in tune with yourself, right? Don't take any pain meds for a couple days if you can, and get in there and just be in tune with yourself. And guess what? If it hurts just standing there, it hurts now. It hurts right now. Mm-hmm. It's just going to hurt worse the more that I lean forward, right? For me, it kind of, I don't know, personally, when I lean forward, it's like it kind of just hurts the same. until I get way down, and then it's not good. It's the leaning back part that's like, I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm good right here, right? Then what they'll do, and I know that you know this, Clay, because I believe you had mentioned it before. After you do, and they'll measure it and get all your things, and the rating schedule is super tight. You're not going to, for most of us are not going to walk away with huge percentages for your back condition. Um, and you're going to think you should, which is funny because the VA isn't going off of what it thinks you should get. It has its own thing, and it is what it is. I mean, my back, and I would probably argue for me personally, I probably should have been on the incapacitating episodes section for a while, because boy, I had some really bad ones where it was like, you had to brace your knees against the sink in order to bend over to brush your teeth. There was times where my
Mm.
knees would just give out and buckle and fall, which is, I mean, that's incapacitating. It's like, look, I ain't
Yeah.
doing nothing. But with the range of motion thing, you want to be as honest and real with where the pain is. Don't push through it and hurt yourself. You're not there trying to win a gold medal. Okay. Be honest, go through it. And I would say that one of the things that will happen is they're going to kind of check for any sort of nerve situations with you as well. They're going to push and prod on your back. And if it's a lower lumbar issue, they're going to push on lower lumbar areas where nerves come in and stuff to see if your knees buckle. And I'll tell you, they did that to me, and mine did. And that poor lady tried to catch me, and I'm like, I'm grabbing onto things as I'm falling over. I wasn't ready for it. Don't fight it.
Yeah.
Do not fight that. If your knees are starting to go, here we go, right? Let it kind of be and see what happens with that. Because even if they don't give you that radiculopathy in that, it is going to be documented in your overall file, and you can always file for that later if they don't give it to you in that moment. For me personally, so the VA is supposed to, if they catch other things that are kind of attributed to that condition, and I don't, Clay's the one that's like the more reading the books guy. I had to, I get it, but I just research it when I need it. So Clay probably knows off the top of his head, but there is a rule somewhere that the VA is supposed to, if they identify these things, they're supposed to kind of, I guess maybe it's not 100%, but if they do, and they can, and they should, sometimes they do add in these extra conditions, even if you didn't file for them. So for example, me personally, I filed for a lower back condition, went in, got rated, came back, and they gave me a lower back condition plus radiculopathy left and right with a bilateral effect. So I was like, well, I didn't even, put in for those. That's awesome. Thank you. So sometimes the VA does right? And obviously, like you said at the beginning, Clay, there are times where, you're going to hear a bunch of bad things because they screwed up. Look, they are going to screw up. That's why there's all these other mechanisms on the backside. But in your C&P exam for back, specific to range of motion, be real, be honest. Don't take pain medications. Tell them when it does hurt. Don't push through it, right? I've heard horror stories, and I'm sure you have too, Clay, of examiners that push down on your back as you're trying to kind of go like this. They're standing behind you and they push you down. That's never happened to me. I would be pissed. Oh, yeah. If somebody does that to you, fall on the ground is what would be my suggestion, right? Don't let them injure you and injure your back worse because they're trying to push on you. Have you ever heard of anything like that, Clay?
I have actually. And in that instance, what I would recommend a veteran do, one,
poke him in the eye.
I would be, that is, I'm not saying be hostile, but I would express saying, hey, don't do that. Like I am going down. This is as far as I can. Whenever I am feeling serious pain right now, do not put your hands on me. Immediately, like as I'm walking out of that office, I'm doing two things. One, I'm thinking about a 4138, which is a personal statement, and I'm going to upload that through Quick Submit or through my accredited rep if I'm using one, just saying this examiner put their hands on me during the range of motion test, and I am in extreme pain, whatever it is you want to say. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the company. If it's VES, I'm calling VES corporate, right? So it's two different avenues. One thing I do want to hit on, and I want to double down on how you explain range of motion, because I completely agree. And to add to it, if I'm doing a range of motion test, right, and the majority of back claims are going to be 10 or 20%. That's just the majority of them. And for any veteran listening to this, if you have a 40% for a back condition, that is solid. Okay. Anything above a 40, it really gets into unfavorable position of the spine, meaning, you're near paralysis, you're edging paralysis, and obviously paralysis is 100% with SMCs and all that stuff. So if you're at 40% for a back condition, solid, right? So if you don't have a frozen spine, you're good. But the majority of ratings are going to be 10 and 20%. And what I would add to the range of motion discussion is I am like you, okay? Right now, sitting in this chair, I have lower back pain on my left side. I've always had it. It sucks. And if I were doing a test right now, the examiner says, hey, tell me about your back pain. I would just say I have constant lower back pain. It's generally on the left side, but very, very close to my spine. And I would describe it as it exactly is, just like that. Then the range of motion test will start, right? I'll bend forward. And then once I start feeling pain, something I want to double down on is the examiner doesn't know when you're feeling pain. That they can't read your mind. You have to express it, right? You either tell them. So I'm bending down. I would say, hey, I'm really starting, my pain is increasing. I can go down a little further. My pain is increasing. And once I hit my limit where I'm like, hey, this freaking hurts, right? I would recommend veterans change. I'm not saying lie. Do not lie, and shame on you if you do. But I would make it as visible and as easy for the examiner to be like, oh, there was a change in pain. Something happened whenever, the veteran bent that far. And I would be verbal, I would do facial expressions. I'm not saying game the game, but if you don't express to the examiner when you feel pain, they don't know when you feel pain, period. Okay. So if you bend all the way down and touch your toes and you're holding back your tears, guess what? You have full range of motion, right? Because you didn't say anything. Now, full range of motion with pain is still 10% technically. But if you do that, you're going to get 10%, period. So I would really double down at being just transparent, I guess would be the best word. Be transparent with your examiner.
Right.
Do you want to add to that, or do you
do.
want to transition to the knees? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And it goes back to that whole, and look, we were both in the Marine Corps. Every branch has its thing, and I'm sure that there's some level of this in every branch. I know, right, that this stuff gets so embedded, but it's back here now, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to not move. Stay still. Don't move. Fly on you, a bug, something crawling on you, you itch, but you're still, right? You're like a damn sniper, right? Don't move. Don't flinch. Don't twitch. Nothing, right? Okay, but it hurts. Suck it up, right? Don't move. Don't twitch, right? So it goes back to your point of you need to inform them somehow, right? Let your body talk as well, right?
Yeah.
Not just verbal, but let yourself have that, that little flinch, that twitch, when you get there. Now, I just wanted to add that in there, that we're so used to this, push through it mentality and not expressing it or showing it in any way, that it's weird that these things just kind of move on with us in life. And you wouldn't think it, but I mean, it's been ingrained. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a whole and get it. Look, I'm not bashing it. It was needed. right? You don't need somebody flinching around and flopping around if the enemy's right there, right? You need somebody to be calm. I get it. But you also need to understand that some of that stuff is now just kind of built in, and you need to kind of undo some of that. All right, back to you.
All right. Yeah. No. So I completely agree with that. But I do want to transition to knees, and then we will end this episode. And I chose knees because it's the most common claimed from the 2024 report. But really, this applies to any joint or appendage, right? So a finger is an appendage. So like your wrist, your elbows, your shoulders, your knees, hips are a little weird because the range of motion is
They are.
different, and your ankles, right? Those are all joints and appendages. So this will relatively be the same. But for the knees, you have your range of motion, okay? And the knee specifically has an instability. And I've there's patellar. You can look at the 38 CFR to look at the actual diagnosis of that. I can't remember off the top of my head. So you can receive 2 different ratings for multiple joints, right? So your knees, theoretically speaking, left knee, right knee can have a rating for range of motion, so 2 ratings, and a rating for instability, right? That's 4 ratings for your knees. The elbows are kind of the same thing because you have elbows and forearms. You can get 4 ratings there. And the, it depends on what joint or appendage you're talking about. But with joints, there's 2 different range of motion tests, and this is specific to joints. You're going to have, let's call it free range of motion, okay? The VA just describes it as range of motion. And then the second one is active range of motion. But for this, we're going to call it free and active. So free range of motion is, whenever you go to the doctor's office, they have that weird bed that's super uncomfortable with weird plastic on it. I'm kind of OCD and I want the plastic to be flat, but once I sit on it, it just crinkles up and it blows my mind. So that's the table you're sitting on, right? I'm sure everyone knows what I'm talking about. You sit on that, your knees are dangling, and the examiner is going to say, hey, bend your knee. So you bend your knee. And then they say, hey, extend your knee. They'll extend your knee. They're supposed to do that 3 times, okay? I have never heard of an examiner, and when I went to my exam, I never did it 3 times, but it's in the DBQ. And so that is free range of motion, meaning there's no pressure, there's nothing added to it whatsoever. They're just, this is my knee. They're just looking at the range of motion, right? The same thing applies to the back. If it hurts right here, I'm gonna express that, okay? Now the knees, how the joints work, and I just want to be, I've only seen 2 veterans out of a lot that have any rating above 20%, right? I saw one veteran with 30% on each knee, and then one with like a 30 and a 40. And those are severe. Like that is, you want to talk about some knee pain, that's what knee pain is. Majority of ratings are 10%, and then you'll have a few 20% in there, and it really depends. So don't, I don't want it to be like you can get 70% rating for your knees. It's probably going to be 10, to be real with you. And so the knees, you can have full range of motion with pain, 10%, the most common. But after free range of motion, then you will stand up. The examiner will have you stand up, and then you'll do an active range of motion. And so from your knees on one foot, so you'll need to balance yourself unless you're like a ninja or whatever. Then you bend your knee, and this is really when pain comes into play. If you have pain on free range of motion, you're obviously going to have pain on active range of motion. It's the inverse relationship that's more common, meaning a lot of people have free range of motion, right? They have pain, but like I can move my knees right now. The second you apply weight to that, especially body weight, that's a whole different game. So most veterans will have a limited range of motion when they're standing on their knee or their foot, one-legged, holding on to something and bending down. And the same thing applies, right? The CMP examiner can't read your mind of your pain. And so if you those one-footed squats that like CrossFitters do, right? If you're over here doing that for whatever reason, more than likely that's going to be like a 0% or 10. And I don't know. I haven't met someone, at least my friends, who can do that because we're all lazy and out of shape after leaving the Marine Corps, right? But that's basically what's going to happen during that exam. And I do want to bring something up about the goniometer. I'm just going to say ruler from here on out.
Oh, yeah. The little circle in the middle with the two rulers on it. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm gonna say ruler, and someone in the comments.
You know what we should do? We should get a little clip of Combat Craig saying the word, because he nails that word. So
awesome.
Then just that would be funny. I'm just saying.
So the ruler, I know veterans are this is controversial, but a lot of veterans are like, the CMP examiner must use the ruler, and technically you're correct, because that's what is required by the DBQ. But then again, something like the knees, I can tell you what a 90-degree angle looks like without having a ruler, right? And so if you look at how the knees are rated, I think it's 180, which would be straight, right? So it starts at, let's just call it 0. Then it goes to 45, 90, and then the other 45. Whatever number that is, and on.
Let's put it in mils instead.
Yeah, yeah, mils, like a whiz wheel, right? And so I'm not a medical professional, and so if you can't bend 290, I don't need a ruler to know, hey, you have severe limited range of motion. If you go to 90, I can be like, yep, that's a right angle. I know what that looks like. So what I'm saying is, it doesn't take a genius to figure out the degree of which of that flexion. Right now, if you were on the borderline of like 30 to 40, all of a sudden that's a different story. But the overwhelming majority of veterans, 45, 90, whatever that is over there. And so I wanted to hit that, because I know it comes up a lot and it is controversial, but it's not as big of a deal as YouTube makes it out to be, I guess would be the best way to put it. But for knee conditions or joints in general, Jason, do you have anything? And then after that, go ahead and feel free to close us out.
Yeah. No, nothing really else. I mean, it's the same thing that we said with the back. It's the same type of thing about just being very aware. Don't take pain medication before you show up, right? That's my biggest thing. You get so used to popping, whatever you're popping, to start off your day, right? To get out of bed and stretch it out. Don't be out in the parking lot of your CMP exam an hour early because you wanted to make sure that you got there, because we all like to recon where we need to go to make sure we're not late, and then be out in the parking lot stretching and getting all limbered up. No. You need to be real, right? Don't do anything out of the ordinary that would make you be in a better position than you really are. So I
got one more thing.
Do it.
Okay, no, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I have one more thing, because I don't want you to close it out without me saying this. I do want to say, and it is critical for veterans to know this about the back or the knees. I don't want to be a spook, okay, but this is true. When you walk into that CMP examiner's office, so you already checked in, you walk into that office and you sit down in that chair. That's being evaluated. Okay, you sitting down in the chair. I don't want to be too, because it's not. I don't want to put too much attention on it, because it's really not as big of a deal as YouTube makes it out to be. But I'm telling you right now, if for some reason, you touch your toes whenever you sit on the chair, which I don't know why you would do that. But if you have full range of motion and there's no expression of pain from you to the examiner, that is a mental note for the examiner. And that needs to be said. Now, I'm not saying when you see a chair, over-exaggerate and huff and puff and, keep a frozen spine as you sit down. Don't do that. Just sit down in a chair as you normally would. And if it hurts, let the examiner know, right? Say like, man, how are you doing today? Well, my back's in pain. This chair's a little low. Whatever it is for you, because I know that comes up a lot. So I just wanted to, I'm not trying to scare you, being like, the CMP examiner knows your GPS coordinates from your home to the office. It's like, chill. Okay. Okay. For real, Jason, that's the last thing I have to say. Go ahead.
And just to double down on that and the scare factor a little bit is, I believe that most C&P exams won't give any hoot about what you do waiting in the waiting room. However, there's that one guy or gal C&P examiner out there that is trying to make sure that they're super extra diligent, and they noticed you sitting out there tying your shoe without an issue. And like Clay said, there's that mental note. So just don't give any reason for somebody to have a negative ruling for you. They don't know what kind of pain you were in bending over to tie your shoe, right? Again, we're used to kind of just, one, if you have pain in your knee, your back, or whatever, pain is one of those things that you kind of just start living with, and it's just part of your life, and you just kind of get used to it. And it can come off kind of the wrong way as you do things that somebody who's not in pain would go like, oh, why would you be able to do it? Because I don't have another damn choice. That's why, right? So just don't give people the any ammunition against you is really the point that I think Clay's trying to make. For the off chance, in my opinion, that does happen. Does it happen? Sure. I'm sure it does. Can I prove that it's happened to everybody that's never gotten rated what they should be? No, I can't. So I can't really say that that's the norm. I would like to think that it's not. But just be wise, right? Don't go in there doing, calisthenics and, doing your P90X in the corner, watching your David Goggins video and doing push-ups over in the corner while all this is going on. It's, well, you know what? He can do it for all of us. And so anyway, to wrap it up, it's basically, look, don't medicate. And I keep saying it because there's times where people do. I forgot that my C&P exam was today, and I just got done taking 800 milligrams of Motrin and an Aleve and 2 aspirin, and some Percocet on top of that. Oh, and a Flexerol because my muscles were stiff. And then it's like, great. Oh, okay, yeah. You're like, all right, and then I just drank 3 beers. Oh, my C&P exam, so I had my wife drive me because I had a couple to drink. Okay, look, not the right move. Be aware of what's going on. Make sure that you are system clean so you can be in tune with yourself, regardless of what sort of an issue it is. With that, we're going to end it here because we've been yapping for an hour and a half. I hope that this gave some sort of insight on what you could expect, some tips and tricks to help ease the anxiety of coming up to a C&P exam, what to expect at that C&P exam, and how you can not only get service connected, but also get the rating that you're looking for by utilizing that schedule of ratings. Now, the one last thing I'm going to throw in here, Clay, is there are times in which everything can be leading up to you getting service connected for whatever the condition is, regardless. And because you're not prepared and you forgot the time frames, you joined the military 9 years ago, but you're a rounder. You like to say, yeah, it's been 10 years. And you show up and you say, oh, yeah, those migraines, yep, I've been having them for like 10 years. Well, guess what? 10 years is before you joined the military, so now it's not service connected. You're providing that evidence against yourself because you decided to round up the time frame. Know your dates, which is something that Clay alluded to at the beginning. Make sure that you are providing that nexus information and that you're giving the correct time frames. Don't round, don't guess. Make sure you have those dates. So with that, thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.